A desperate waitress whispered, "I can't take care of both," and offered one of her twins to the millionaire. What he did next shocked everyone. Subscribe now or lose us forever. Your comments and shares are our lifeline. Don't let this be our only encounter. Story unfolds. The fluorescent lights of Romano's Italian restaurant hummed overhead as Sarah Martinez wiped down table 12 for the third time that evening. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from exhaustion that had become her constant companion. At 27, dark circles under her brown eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent caring for 6-month-old twins while working double shifts to keep their tiny apartment. "Sarah, table 6 needs their check," called Maria, the head waitress. Her voice carrying the familiar edge of impatience. Sarah nodded, forcing a smile she didn't feel. The dinner rush at Romano's was always brutal, but tonight felt particularly suffocating. Every customer seemed demanding, every order complicated, every tip smaller than hoped. She glanced at her phone hidden behind the cash register. 11:47 p.m. Just 13 minutes until her shift ended, then she could rush home to relieve Mrs. Garcia, her elderly neighbor who watched Matteo and Isabella while she worked. The babysitting fee would eat into tonight's tips, leaving her with barely enough for formula and diapers. Table 6 was occupied by a man in his early 30s, dining alone. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, and his dark hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour. He'd been nursing the same glass of wine for 2 hours, occasionally glancing up from his phone to observe the restaurant with intense blue eyes that seemed to absorb everything. "Here's your check, sir," Sarah said softly, placing the leather folder beside his barely touched osso buco. Her voice carried the slight accent of her grandmother's Spanish, more pronounced when she was tired. "Thank you," he replied, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You look exhausted. Long day." Sarah's laugh was hollow. Long life, more like. The words escaped before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted the unprofessional slip. "I'm sorry, sir. That was inappropriate." "No need to apologize. We all have struggles." He studied her with those piercing eyes, and Sarah felt an odd sense that he was seeing something others missed. "Do you have children?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Sarah's throat tightened as images of Matteo and Isabella flashed through her mind, their tiny faces, their constant needs, the impossible mathematics of raising 2 babies on a waitress's salary. "Twins," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. 6 months old. The man nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a black leather wallet, extracting several bills without counting them. "Keep the change." Sarah glanced down at the money and gasped. He'd left $300 on a $60 check. Her eyes flew back to his face, searching for some explanation, some catch. Rich men didn't leave tips like that without expecting something in return. "Sir, this is too much. I can't." "You can and you will." His voice was firm but kind. "Consider it an investment." "An investment in what?" He stood, adjusting his suit jacket with practiced ease. "In hope." Before Sarah could respond, he was walking toward the exit, his footsteps confident and purposeful. She stood frozen, clutching the money that represented more than she usually made in a week. Her hands shook as reality set in. This was enough for rent, utilities, diapers, and formula. For the first time in months she could breathe. But as relief flooded through her, a darker thought crept in. What if this stranger had expectations? What if his generosity came with strings attached? In her experience, nothing good ever came without a price. The restaurant door chimed as he disappeared into the night, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers, and a hope she was afraid to trust. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself watching for the mysterious man every night during her shift. The $300 had been a lifeline. She'd caught up on overdue bills and bought enough supplies to last the twins through the month. But the financial relief was temporary, and her situation remained precarious. Mrs. Garcia had been patient about the delayed babysitting payments, but Sarah could see the concern growing in the older woman's eyes. At 73, Mrs. Garcia was doing Sarah an enormous favor by watching the twins for practically nothing, and Sarah hated taking advantage of her kindness. Tonight was particularly challenging. Isabella had been running a fever all day, and Mateo refused to sleep without his sister nearby. Sarah had called in sick 2 days this week already, and manager Mr. Peterson had made it clear that her job was hanging by a thread. "You're distracted tonight," Maria observed during a brief lull between customers. "Everything okay?" Sarah nodded automatically, but her thoughts were consumed with worry. Isabella needed to see a doctor, but the clinic visit would cost money she didn't have. Her health insurance through the restaurant was minimal, covering only basic preventive care. At 10:30 p.m., she was clearing table 9 when she noticed a familiar figure being seated at table 6. Her heart skipped as she recognized the expensive suit and confident posture. The mysterious man had returned. This time he seemed to be studying the menu more carefully, though Sarah suspected he was actually observing the restaurant's dynamics. She watched from behind the counter as different servers approached him, but he politely declined their service, asking specifically for the young lady with the dark hair who was working last time. Sarah approached his table with professional composure, though her pulse quickened. "Good evening, sir. Welcome back to Romano's." "Good evening, Sarah." The use of her name startled her. She hadn't told him, and she hadn't been wearing a name tag that night. "How are the twins?" The question was asked with genuine concern, not casual politeness. Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back quickly. They're managing. "Isabella has been sick, but babies get fevers. It's normal. Have you taken her to see a doctor?" The directness of the question caught Sarah off guard. She hesitated, pride warring with desperation. "I'm planning to," she said carefully. "But—" Sarah looked around nervously, aware that Mr. Peterson was watching from his office. "I should take your order, sir. The kitchen closes soon. I'll have whatever you recommend, but first I'd like you to sit down for a moment." "I can't. I'm working, and my manager will understand that you're providing exceptional customer service." His voice carried an authority that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed. "Please, just for a minute." Against her better judgment, Sarah slid into the booth across from him. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of stress despite his youth, and the way his expensive watch caught the light as he folded his hands on the table. "My name is Alexander Blackwood," he said quietly. "I own several businesses here in the city, including the building that houses Romano's." Sarah's eyes widened. She'd heard whispers about the young entrepreneur who owned half the downtown district, but she'd never imagined she'd been serving him. "I've been watching you work," he continued, "and I'm impressed by your dedication. You're here every night. You treat every customer with respect despite your exhaustion, and you handle stress with remarkable grace. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood, but I have a proposition for you." His blue eyes were intense, studying her reaction carefully. "I need someone I can trust to help with a project that's very important to me. Someone with integrity, someone who understands what it means to fight for survival." Sarah's mind raced. Rich men didn't offer opportunities to struggling waitresses without expecting something in return. What kind of project? The details would need to be discussed privately, but it would involve a significant change in your circumstances. Better income, better hours, and most importantly, proper medical care for your children. The offer was too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Sarah had learned not to trust fairy tales. Real life didn't work that way, especially not for single mothers living paycheck to paycheck. "Why me?" she asked suspiciously. "You don't know anything about me." Alexander's expression softened slightly. "I know you're desperate enough to consider options that terrify you. I know you'd sacrifice anything for your children. And I know you have a strength that most people lack." His words hit too close to home, revealing an insight that made Sarah uncomfortable. How could a stranger see so clearly into her soul? Before she could respond, Mr. Peterson appeared at their table, his face flushed with irritation. "Martinez, what do you think you're doing? You don't socialize with customers during your shift." Alexander's demeanor changed instantly, his voice taking on the cold edge of someone accustomed to command. "Mr. Peterson, I assume? I specifically requested Ms. Martinez's service because of her professionalism. Perhaps you should focus on training your other staff to her level rather than criticizing excellence, Mr." Peterson's face went pale as recognition dawned. "Mr. Blackwood, I didn't realize. I apologize, sir. Sarah, please continue taking care of Mr. Blackwood's needs." As the manager retreated, Sarah stared at Alexander with new understanding. This man wielded the kind of power that could change her life with a word, or destroy it just as easily. "Think about my offer," he said quietly, sliding a business card across the table. "Call me when you're ready to discuss details." But as Sarah picked up the card, a chill ran down her spine. She was so desperate that she was actually considering trusting a stranger with her children's future. What choice did she have? The next morning, Sarah stared at Alexander Blackwood's business card while Isabella cried in her arms and Mateo pulled at her pajama pants demanding attention. The fever hadn't broken, and Isabella's tiny body felt frighteningly warm against Sarah's chest. Mrs. Garcia knocked softly on the apartment door before entering with her spare key. "Mija, how is the little one?" "Worse," Sarah admitted, her voice hoarse from a sleepless night. "I need to take her to the emergency room, but the copay alone will be $200, and if they need to run tests—" The elderly woman's weathered face creased with concern. "You cannot wait on money when it comes to babies, Sarah. Their bodies are too small to fight alone." Sarah knew Mrs. Garcia was right, but knowing didn't solve the financial impossibility. She'd already maxed out her credit card buying formula and diapers, and her next paycheck wouldn't cover rent if she spent it on medical bills. "Maybe I could ask the church for help," Sarah said weakly, though she knew the congregation was already stretched thin, helping other families in crisis. Mrs. Garcia settled Mateo on her lap, her experienced hands soothing his fussiness. "There is another option, Mija. The business card you showed me last night. Perhaps this man meant what he said about helping." Sarah had told Mrs. Garcia about Alexander's offer, though she'd been vague about the details since she didn't understand them herself. The older woman had listened with the wisdom of someone who'd survived 7 decades of hardship, offering neither judgment nor false optimism. "But what if he expects something I can't give?" Sarah voiced her deepest fear. "Rich men don't help poor women out of kindness. There's always a price." "Sometimes, Mija. But sometimes desperate situations create unexpected angels." Mrs. Garcia's voice carried the authority of experience. "Your babies need you to be brave, not proud." At 11 a.m., Sarah called the number on Alexander's card, her hands trembling as Isabella whimpered against her shoulder. The phone rang twice before a crisp female voice answered. "Blackwood Enterprises, Mr. Blackwood's private line." "This is Sarah Martinez. Mr. Blackwood asked me to call about a position." "One moment, please." The hold music was classical and expensive, reinforcing Sarah's sense of stepping into a world where she didn't belong. After 30 seconds, Alexander's familiar voice came on the line. "Sarah, I'm glad you called. How is Isabella?" The use of her daughter's name startled her. She hadn't mentioned the twins' names during their brief conversations. "She's sick, running a fever I can't break. Have you taken her to be seen?" "I'm about to, but you're worried about the cost." His tone was understanding, not judgmental. "I'll take care of it. Take her to Children's Hospital downtown and tell them you're covered under the Blackwood Foundation Emergency Assistance Program. They'll know what that means." Sarah's throat closed with emotion. "Mr. Blackwood, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity. Consider it an advance on your salary." "But I haven't even heard about the job yet." "Then let's remedy that. Can you meet me this afternoon, 2 o'clock at the office address on my card?" Sarah glanced around her tiny apartment, at the laundry she couldn't afford to wash, the empty refrigerator, the pile of overdue bills on her kitchen counter. Desperation made the decision for her. "I'll be there." 3 hours later, after a terrifying but successful trip to Children's Hospital where Isabella was diagnosed with a treatable ear infection and prescribed antibiotics that were somehow mysteriously covered, Sarah stood outside the gleaming tower that housed Blackwood Enterprises. The lobby was all marble and glass, filled with people in expensive clothes conducting important business. Sarah felt acutely aware of her worn jeans and faded sweater as she approached the security desk. "Sarah Martinez, to see Alexander Blackwood," she said quietly. The security guard's professional demeanor shifted to something warmer. "Of course, Ms. Martinez. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. Take the express elevator to the 42nd floor." The elevator ride gave Sarah time to second-guess her decision. What was she doing here? She was a high school dropout with 2 babies and no skills beyond taking orders and carrying plates. Whatever Alexander wanted from her, she was probably unqualified to provide. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that screamed understated wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. "Ms. Martinez?" A stylish woman in her 50s approached with a warm smile. "I'm Catherine, Mr. Blackwood's executive assistant. He's waiting for you in his office." Alexander's office was larger than Sarah's entire apartment. He stood silhouetted against the windows, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city below. When he turned, his expression was more serious than she'd seen before. "How is Isabella?" "Better. The antibiotics are already helping." Sarah's voice was small in the vast space. "Thank you for arranging the hospital visit. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay me. You need to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Alexander gestured to a seating area with 2 leather chairs separated by a coffee table. "Please sit." Sarah perched on the edge of the chair, her posture defensive. "What kind of job are you offering, Mr. Blackwood?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those intense blue eyes. When he finally spoke, his words changed everything. "I need someone to be a mother to my daughter." Sarah's heart stopped. "Your daughter?" "She's 8 years old. Her name is Emma, and she's the reason I've been watching you so carefully." Alexander's voice carried a pain that made Sarah's chest ache. "You see, Sarah, I'm dying." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, searching for signs of illness in his strong frame and clear complexion, finding none. "That's impossible. You look healthy. I have an excellent medical team and treatments that buy me time." Alexander's smile was grim. "But I have perhaps 18 months, maybe 2 years if I'm fortunate." Sarah's mind reeled. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Emma is going to lose the only parent she has left, and I need to know she'll be cared for by someone who understands what it means to love a child more than your own life." The magnitude of what he was suggesting began to dawn on her. "You want me to take care of your daughter when you—" "I want you to become her legal guardian. I want you to raise her as your own, alongside your twins." Alexander leaned forward, his intensity piercing. In exchange, I'll provide everything your family needs: housing, education, medical care, financial security for life. Sarah felt the room spinning. It was too much, too fast, too impossible to comprehend. "But you don't know me," she whispered. "How could you trust me with something so precious?" Alexander's expression softened. "Because I've been where you are now. I know what it feels like to love someone so much you'd sacrifice everything to protect them. I know you'd die before you'd let harm come to a child in your care." "How can you know that?" "Because 3 weeks ago you were so desperate to provide for your twins that you were seriously considering giving one of them to a stranger if it meant the other would have a better life." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She'd never told anyone about that dark moment of contemplation, the thought that had terrified her, even as it crossed her mind. "How do you know that?" she whispered. Alexander's smile was sad but knowing. "Because, Sarah Martinez, I was once that stranger, and the choice you almost made, it's the same choice my mother made 25 years ago." Copia Publica 04. Sarah's world tilted on its axis as Alexander's words echoed in the vast office. The revelation that he had once been an unwanted child offered by a desperate mother recontextualized everything she thought she knew about this powerful man. "Your mother." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "She tried to give you away." Alexander's jaw tightened, old pain flickering across his features. "Not tried, did. I was 4 years old when she approached a wealthy family dining at the restaurant where she worked. She was 19, alone, and drowning in poverty just like you." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. The moment of weakness she'd experienced, that fleeting, desperate thought of offering one twin to ensure the other's survival, had been Alexander's reality. "What happened?" "The family took me in temporarily, but they weren't prepared for the emotional complexity of the situation. I spent 3 years bouncing between their house and foster care while lawyers sorted out the legal mess." Alexander stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. "My mother signed away her parental rights, but she visited whenever the court allowed it. She'd cry and apologize, promising she was getting her life together so she could take me back." "Did she?" "She died of a drug overdose when I was 7. The words were delivered without emotion, but Sarah could see the rigid set of his shoulders. "The wealthy family, the Blackwoods, eventually adopted me officially. They gave me their name, the best education money could buy, and access to their business empire. But they never let me forget that I was charity case who should be grateful for their generosity." Sarah's heart ached for the 4-year-old boy who'd been caught in the crossfire of adult desperation and privilege. "Alexander, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It made me who I am." He turned back to face her, his expression hardening into business mode. "It also taught me to recognize desperation in others. That night 3 weeks ago, I saw you looking at me with the same calculation my mother had in her eyes. You were measuring my wealth against your children's needs, wondering if a stranger might provide what you couldn't." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks as her darkest moment was laid bare. "I never would have actually." "Wouldn't you?" Alexander's voice was gentle but relentless. "If Isabella had needed surgery you couldn't afford. If Mateo had been malnourished, how far would you go to save them?" Sarah couldn't answer because she knew the truth. There was no line she wouldn't cross for her children. "That's why I know I can trust you with Emma," Alexander continued. "Because you understand that being a parent means making impossible choices and living with the consequences. But taking your daughter, that's not the same as what your mother did. You're offering me everything." "Am I?" Alexander's smile was sharp. "I'm asking you to take responsibility for a child you've never met, to love her like your own, to help her grieve the only parent she's ever known. I'm asking you to uproot your entire life and move into my world, where people will judge you for your past and question your motives. You think that's not a sacrifice? Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was proposing. I need to think about this. It's too much to process. Of course, take all the time you need. Alexander returned to his desk and withdrew a thick envelope. In the meantime, this should help with immediate expenses. Consider it a signing bonus, whether you accept the position or not. Sarah's hands shook as she accepted the envelope. Through the paper, she could feel the thickness of cash that probably represented more money than she'd seen in her lifetime. There's one more thing you should know, Alexander said quietly. Emma doesn't know about my illness. As far as she understands, I'm interviewing housekeepers and nannies because I work long hours. If you decide to meet her, that's the story we'll maintain until you're ready to hear the whole truth. And if I say no, then I'll continue looking for someone else who might love my daughter the way you love your twins. Alexander's voice was steady, but Sarah caught the flicker of fear in his eyes. But I hope you'll at least meet Emma before deciding. She's special. That evening, Sarah sat in her tiny apartment, counting the money Alexander had given her, $5,000 in neat $100 bills. It was enough to catch up on rent, pay off her credit cards, and stock her pantry for months. It was also a reminder of the vast gulf between her world and Alexander's. Mrs. Garcia had taken the twins for the night, insisting that Sarah needed time to think without distractions. But alone in the silence, Sarah's thoughts raced in circles. Could she really become a mother to another child? Could she navigate the wealthy world Alexander inhabited? And most importantly, could she help an 8-year-old girl cope with losing her father? Her phone rang, displaying an unknown number. Hello? Ms. Martinez, this is Catherine from Mr. Blackwood's office. He asked me to call about arranging a meeting with Emma, if you're interested. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down on her. When? Tomorrow afternoon. There's a children's park near your neighborhood, Riverside Park. Mr. Blackwood thought a casual setting might be best for a first meeting. What do I tell my children? Bring them along. Emma loves babies, and it might help her feel more comfortable. After hanging up, Sarah stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Tomorrow, she would meet the little girl who might become her daughter. The thought terrified and excited her in equal measure. She thought about Alexander's story, about a desperate mother making an impossible choice, and wondered if history was about to repeat itself in a way no one could have predicted. Riverside Park was busy with Saturday afternoon families when Sarah arrived, pushing the twins in their second-hand stroller. She dressed carefully, not too poor, not too fancy, settling on clean jeans and a simple sweater that hid the worst of her exhaustion. Alexander was easy to spot, sitting on a bench near the playground in casual clothes that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly income. Beside him sat a little girl with dark blonde hair and bright green eyes, her legs swinging as she watched other children play. Emma Blackwood was beautiful in the way that only children can be, with an otherworldly quality that made passers-by smile. But there was something else, an unusual stillness, as if she were observing the world from behind invisible glass. Sarah, Alexander stood as they approached, his smile warm but nervous. I'd like you to meet my daughter. Emma, this is Miss Sarah, the lady I told you about. Emma's gaze moved from Sarah to the twins with intense curiosity. Are those your babies? Yes, this is Isabella and Matteo. They're 6 months old. They're so small. Emma's voice held wonder. Can I see them better? Sarah positioned the stroller so Emma could peer at the twins, who were awake and alert in the mild afternoon sunshine. Isabella gurgled happily, while Matteo reached toward Emma's bright hair with chubby fingers. He likes you, Sarah observed, watching Emma's face light up with delight. I've always wanted a baby brother or sister, Emma said wistfully, but Daddy says it's just us. Alexander's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, and Sarah felt a pang of understanding. How many times had Emma asked for siblings? How many normal childhood wishes would she never see fulfilled? "Would you like to push them on the swings?" Sarah offered. "There are baby swings over there." For the next hour, Emma threw herself into helping with the twins with an enthusiasm that both charmed and concerned Sarah. The 8-year-old seemed desperate for connection, chattering constantly about school, her favorite books, and her elaborate plans for the twins' futures. "Isabella could learn ballet, and Matteo could play soccer," Emma declared as she carefully pushed Isabella's swing. "I could teach them both to read early. I learned when I was 3. 3? Sarah glanced at Alexander, who nodded confirmation. "That's very advanced." "Emma is exceptionally bright," Alexander said quietly. "Her IQ tested at over 160. It makes social connections challenging." Sarah began to understand Emma's intensity. Genius children often struggled to relate to their peers, living in a world that moved too slowly for their racing minds. "What's your favorite subject in school?" Sarah asked Emma. "I don't go to regular school," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "I have tutors. Daddy says regular school would be boring for me, but sometimes I wish I could try it anyway." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Emma was isolated not just by her intelligence, but by her father's protective instincts. She was a lonely little girl, trapped in an adult world. When Matteo began fussing, Sarah lifted him from the swing to feed him. Emma watched with fascination as Sarah settled on a bench and positioned the baby for his bottle. "Does it hurt when they bite?" Emma asked seriously. "They don't have teeth yet," Sarah explained. "But when they do come in, feeding can be tricky. Will you teach me how to feed them?" The question was asked with such hope that Sarah's heart clenched. "Would you like to try with Isabella?" For the next few minutes, Sarah guided Emma through the process of bottle feeding, watching the child's face glow with pride as Isabella drank contentedly. "I'm good at this," Emma announced. "You're a natural," Sarah agreed, and meant it. Alexander had been unusually quiet during this exchange, and when Sarah glanced at him, she saw something vulnerable in his expression. He was watching his daughter with desperate love, memorizing moments he knew he was running out of time to experience. "Emma," he said gently, "why don't you show Miss Sarah the playground? I need to make a quick phone call." As Emma led her toward the climbing equipment, chattering about her plans to teach the twins to use the slides when they were older, Sarah felt Alexander's eyes following them. She understood now why he'd chosen this setting for their meeting. He was watching his daughter interact with a potential new family, gauging whether the chemistry was right. "Ms. Sarah." Emma's voice was suddenly smaller, more uncertain. "Are you going to be our new nanny?" Sarah knelt down to Emma's eye level, choosing her words carefully. "Your father asked me to spend time with you to see if we get along well together. What do you think so far?" Emma considered this with the seriousness of someone far older than 8. "I think you're nice, and I really like your babies, but..." "But what, sweetheart? Most nannies don't stay very long. They get scared of how smart I am, or Daddy fires them for not doing things right." Emma's green eyes were ancient with disappointment. "Will you stay?" The question pierced Sarah's heart. How many temporary caregivers had this child lost? How many adults had failed to see past her intelligence to the lonely little girl underneath? "I promise that if I become your nanny, I won't leave unless you want me to," Sarah said firmly. Emma studied her face intently, as if trying to detect deception. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I believe you." When they returned to Alexander, he was off the phone but looked tense. "Everything all right, Daddy?" Emma asked. "Just work, sweetheart." "Nothing to worry about." But his smile was strained, and Sarah caught the way he pressed his hand briefly to his chest. "Emma, Why don't you help me put the babies back in their stroller? Sarah suggested, sensing that Alexander needed a moment to compose himself. As Emma busied herself with settling the twins, Alexander approached Sarah. I have to leave town unexpectedly. Business emergency. Would you be willing to watch Emma for the weekend? It would give you both a chance to get to know each other better. Sarah felt panic flutter in her chest. A whole weekend? I don't know anything about caring for a child her age. Emma is very self-sufficient. She just needs someone to be there, to make sure she eats and feels safe. Alexander's voice was urgent now. Please, Sarah, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Looking at Emma, who was making silly faces at Matteo to make him smile, Sarah made her decision. Okay, but she comes to my apartment. I can't leave the twins. Of course. I'll have Catherine deliver some of Emma's things. Alexander's relief was palpable. Thank you. As they prepared to leave the park, Emma slipped her small hand into Sarah's. Will Isabella and Matteo sleep in my room? They'll sleep in their cribs in my room, but you can help me with their bedtime routine if you want. I'd like that very much. Walking home with Emma chattering beside the stroller, Sarah realized she'd just committed to caring for a genius 8-year-old whose father was dying, and she still had no idea what she was getting herself into. But watching Emma's animated face as she planned activities for the twins, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected. Not just maternal protection, but genuine affection for this strange, brilliant, lonely little girl. Maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation could work. The weekend with Emma revealed depths to the situation that Sarah hadn't anticipated. The 8-year-old was indeed brilliant. She spoke 3 languages fluently, could discuss literature at a high school level, and had taught herself basic coding from library books. But she was also heartbreakingly innocent about normal childhood experiences. You mean other kids my age don't read medical journals for fun? Emma asked Saturday evening, as Sarah prepared the twins' bottles. She was sitting cross-legged on Sarah's worn carpet, entertaining Matteo with complex shadow puppets that told elaborate stories. Most 8-year-olds prefer picture books and cartoons, Sarah explained gently. There's nothing wrong with being advanced, but it's okay to enjoy simple things too. Emma absorbed this information with the intensity she applied to everything. Is that why other children think I'm weird? Sarah's heart ached. Have other children said that to you? The tutor's kids sometimes visit during lessons. They look at me like I'm a science experiment. Emma's matter-of-fact delivery made the statement even more heartbreaking. I try to talk about things they understand, but I always get it wrong. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep in Sarah's bed, she was afraid to sleep alone in the unfamiliar apartment. Sarah called Alexander. He answered on the first ring, sounding exhausted. How is she? He asked immediately. She's wonderful, but Alexander, she's so isolated. She doesn't know how to relate to other children. I know. His voice was heavy with guilt. I thought I was protecting her, giving her the best education possible. But I realize now that I may have robbed her of a normal childhood. It's not too late, Sarah said softly. Children are resilient. With the right environment, she could learn to connect with peers. That's what I'm hoping you can give her. A real family, normal experiences, the chance to be a child instead of just a brilliant mind. Sarah was quiet for a moment, listening to the twins' soft breathing from their cribs. Alexander, there's something I need to ask. When you were at the park yesterday, I saw you. Were you having chest pains? The silence stretched so long, Sarah thought the call had dropped. Finally, Alexander spoke. The doctors say I have good days and bad days. Yesterday was challenging. How much time do you really have? Honestly, the treatments are becoming less effective. I might have months rather than the years I originally hoped for. His voice broke slightly. That's why this weekend was so important. I needed to know that Emma could bond with you quickly. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. She's already attached. She spent an hour tonight showing me pictures in medical books, explaining various conditions because she thought I'd find it interesting. She's trying so hard to connect with me through the only way she knows how. And I love her already. The admission surprised Sarah with its intensity. She's not just brilliant, she's kind, curious, and desperately eager to belong somewhere. When she helped me give Matteo his bath tonight, she was so gentle and careful. She has a natural nurturing instinct, like her potential new mother. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything. Alexander, I want to do this. I want to be Emma's guardian. But I need to know everything. About your condition, the timeline, what happens legally, financially, all of it. Are you sure? Once we start the legal process, there's no going back. You'll be responsible for Emma's entire future. Sarah looked at the sleeping child curled up in her bed, dark blonde hair spread across the pillow, one small hand clutching the stuffed elephant she'd insisted on bringing for the twins to play with. Even in sleep, Emma's face held the intensity that marked her as extraordinary, I'm sure, but Emma deserves to know the truth about what's happening to you. She's too intelligent to be kept in the dark, and she'll need time to process this before I die. Alexander finished the sentence Sarah couldn't say. You're right. I've been protecting her from the truth, but she needs to prepare for what's coming. Over the next 2 hours, they discussed practical details that made the situation feel overwhelmingly real. Alexander's lawyers would begin guardianship paperwork immediately. A trust fund worth several $1 million would provide for all 4 children's needs. Sarah would move into Alexander's penthouse apartment within the month, giving Emma stability during the transition period. What do I tell my twins when they're old enough to ask why Emma joined our family? Sarah asked. You tell them the truth, that sometimes families are created by choice rather than biology, and that love comes in many forms. Sunday evening, as Alexander came to collect Emma, the little girl threw her arms around Sarah in a fierce hug. This was the best weekend ever, Emma declared. When can we do it again? Actually, sweetheart, Alexander said carefully, I have something important to discuss with both you and Miss Sarah. Why don't we all sit down? Sarah's stomach clenched as she recognized the moment of truth. Emma, with her extraordinary perception, immediately sensed the gravity of the situation. Daddy, is something wrong? Alexander took Emma's hands in his blue eyes bright with unshed tears. Emma, you know how sometimes people get sick and doctors try to help them get better? Emma nodded, her brilliant mind already racing ahead to conclusions that would break most adults' hearts. I'm sick, sweetheart, very sick, and the doctors have done everything they can, but my body isn't getting better. Emma's face went very still, the way it did when she was processing complex information. Are you dying, Daddy? The direct question startled Alexander, but he recovered quickly. Yes, Emma, I am. How long? I don't know exactly, maybe a few months, maybe longer. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes moving between Alexander and Sarah with calculation that was heartbreaking in someone so young. And you want, Ms. Sarah, to take care of me after? Only if you're comfortable with that idea, if you'd prefer someone else. No. Emma's voice was firm. I want to stay with Sarah and Isabella and Matteo. They feel like family already. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as Emma turned to her with ancient eyes in a child's face. Will you really keep your promise not to leave me? I promise, Emma. We're going to be a family, all of us together. Emma nodded once, then launched herself into Sarah's arms. As Sarah held the brilliant, brave little girl who was about to lose everything, she felt the final piece of her heart click into place. 3 months later, Alexander Blackwood passed away peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, Emma stood between Sarah and Mrs. Garcia, holding Isabella while Matteo slept in his stroller. She didn't cry. Instead, she spoke clearly and eloquently about a father who had loved her enough to find her the perfect new family. "Daddy always said that the best stories have happy endings," Emma told the gathered mourners. "This isn't an ending, it's a new beginning." Later that evening, in the penthouse apartment that was now their home, Sarah tucked Emma into bed in her new room decorated with photos of all 4 children together. "Mama Sarah," Emma said softly. It was the first time she'd used the title, and it made Sarah's heart soar. "Do you think Daddy would be proud of our family?" Sarah smoothed Emma's hair back from her forehead, seeing Alexander's eyes looking back at her. "I think he'd be overjoyed, sweetheart. He brought us together because he knew we needed each other. Will you tell Isabella and Matteo about him when they're older? About how he saved all of us?" "Every day," Sarah promised. "They'll know that they have a guardian angel who made sure we became a family." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah stood in the doorway looking at the life Alexander's sacrifice had created. A desperate waitress, a dying businessman, and 4 children who needed each other had become something beautiful and whole. Sometimes the most extraordinary families are born from the most ordinary moments of human desperation and love. And sometimes, when someone is brave enough to ask for help, miracles disguise themselves as second chances. In her pocket, Sarah carried Alexander's final letter, a message for Emma to read on her 18th birthday, when she would inherit the foundation he'd created to help other families in crisis. The letter ended with words that Sarah had memorized. "Love multiplies when it's shared, never divides. Take care of each other, and remember that the greatest gift isn't what we receive, but what we choose to give." Their story wasn't ending, it was just beginning.